We have a story in one of our sacred texts called Upanishads. There a king is suddenly seized by a keen desire to know God. So he asks his ministers to get the wisest man in his kingdom to speak to him of God. So that wisest man is a sage. So he is brought from his hermitage in the forest. So he comes to the king's, and the king he sits there and the king tells him, "Sir, I want to know of God." That sage keeps quiet. Second time the king repeats, "Sir, I want to know of God." Still he keeps quiet. And then third time with a little impatience, the king raises his voice and says, "I have been saying I want to know of God." The sage says, "King, I have been telling you." That the story ends. When you speak of God, it is only the language of silence. It is in silence that you can communicate of higher things. I was recently staying in a home in Detroit, and that lady who was our host, she had hung a number of pictures, and one quotation struck me, and that was, "If you don't understand my silence, you are not likely to understand my words either." I thought it was a very profound observation. So I have been seeing since yesterday. So wherever we meet, there is a very pressing silence which makes all talk sound silly. Out of silence, all creation starts. Mother used to say that to talk usefully for 5 minutes, you have to observe silence for 24 hours. She didn't mean an external silence, but an inner silence. It is only in that inner silence that things reveal themselves. You will find in the East a lot of people not speaking. They take a vow not to speak, but they will write anything. But that is an exaggeration. Because even if the mouth doesn't speak, the mind goes on speaking, perhaps with more speed. So it is the mental silence, the inner silence, that is really productive, conducive to spiritual experience than physical silence. Physical silence, has something oppressive about it. But spiritual inner silence has something deep, something profound, and it relaxes you in 2 minutes, what would normally require about half an hour. So we have to learn to be silent. And to be silent One has to learn to live by oneself. To spend some time in the day by oneself and for oneself. But many are afraid to be by themselves. They always want company. If by chance they happen to be alone, they will have their TV or their stereo, something. They are not prepared to be alone with their soul. That is where the famous lines from Savitri, Sri Aurobindo's. He says, in moments when the inner lamps are lit and the life's cherished guests are left outside, our spirit sits alone and speaks to its gulfs. That is the best definition of a required condition for meditation. There is around us, above us, a zone of silence, of peace. It is because that there is this zone that we are able to function, we are able to talk, we are able to act. But we don't take notice of that. So at least when we want to meditate, we must conceive of that silence. You know of the aura, those vibrations of light around a physical figure. Similarly, there is a circle of silence zone. One has to relax and allow that silence to take hold of ourselves. We shall not try to catch that. It can't be caught. It is like straining while trying to relax. Just let oneself go and mentally have a picture of that silence, of waves of silence, which just envelop you, maybe for a second, maybe for a minute, and then recall that experience. When any experience overwhelms you, an experience of joy, of beauty, of sound, of sublimity, this silence shuts you out from every other occupation, every other experience. It is only in this, to open to this pregnant silence, that exercises like meditation, contemplation, concentration are resorted to. For those who can tune themselves to this divine language, no exercises of meditation are necessary. There are some who don't need to meditate because they are always tuned as a result of their homework in their previous births. But it requires a background, a climate in which this silence can reign. When one can connect oneself to this silence, and that means rejection from life of movements which are foreign, which are alien to this silence, to this peace. Things like agitations, excitements, anger, violence, these are highly antagonistic to deeper movements of the soul. A wave of anger not only vitiates physically, but psychologically it leaves some grooves in which every future movement tends to flow. I have known many spiritual people who have had to pay a very high penalty for being slaves of anger, slave of desire is not that harmful because it spends itself away. Waves of violence are again very harmful. Moments of egoism are particularly harmful. What is called the spiritual ego has ruined many at the mountain tops. Spiritual ego is a contradiction in terms, because nobody can be spiritual as long as one has a sense of ego. Still, there are some who are spiritual on one side, but egoistic on the other. This is possible because we are not unitary beings. Each one of us has multiple sides. There is a side which is good, aspiring, generous, devoted. There is another side which is very little, very mean, very small. And the contradiction between the two, conflict between the two, creates a disequilibrium, and one gets bogged down in spiritual practices. This is what is called the requirement of unification of the being around the central aspiration. We have to pull up all the parts, the mind, the heart, the emotions, the life energies, even the physical body, and organize them, as Mother used to say, around the psychic, around the central aspiration. When Sri Aurobindo says that there are two powers that alone can effect in their conjunction the great and difficult aim, the great and difficult object which is the aim of our endeavor, a fixed and unfailing aspiration that calls from below, and a supreme grace from above that answers. Now this aspiration is a movement from the being, wanting to go forward, wanting to go upwards towards the divine. It has to be fixed. Everyone starts with that flame. But this aspiration usually is centered in one part. Some who are intellectual, it is in the mind. Some who are more emotional, it is in the heart. Some who are very dynamic, outgoing, in their willpower. But the other parts don't share that aspiration in the beginning. So when those parts begin to become active, they cloud the aspiration of one part. That is why a preparation and a purification of all the parts is indispensable if the aspiration has to be continuous. But mere aspiration will not deliver the goods. There are two elements that have to meet. The grace from above. In spiritual dialectics, there is always a problem. Whether it is personal effort that achieves or the grace. If you say grace it is that achieves, then why personal effort at all? The grace will do everything. But that is not true. Because Sri Aurobindo points out, which very few have done, and that is, the action of grace depends upon a state of grace already prepared. We have to prepare a state of grace before the descent of grace can be effective. And to prepare the state of grace is the personal contribution of everyone. To build the climate, to create conditions in which the grace will bear fruit. It is likened in the classical simile to a field on which the rain drops. Unless one first works and keeps the field ready, sown, and the seeds ready, the water that falls will be wasted. So it is a combined working of grace and effort, personal effort, that alone can be fruitful. There is first this aspiration, rejection of what conflicts with this aspiration, and third condition is surrender. The very concept of surrender shocks a Western mind. They get very uncomfortable when you speak of surrender, because every Western child, as far as we know, is brought up on this ethos that individuality, your personality, your self is very precious. So they are not to allow anything to conflict or interfere with the functioning of one's individuality. It is to be safeguarded. Now persons coming from this background, when you speak to them of surrender, they feel very disturbed. How can we give up what we have? Then the freedom is for whom? If I give up my individuality, for whom is this freedom? For whom is this liberation, perfection? They forget that when you are asked to surrender, you are not asked to surrender to somebody or someone or something outside yourself. You are to surrender to your own higher self. Each person has a lower nature and a higher nature, a lower self and a higher self. So the lower self has to surrender itself to the higher self. And the higher self elevates the lower one. It doesn't cancel it. It doesn't exterminate it. Surrender is the tuning of your will to a higher will. Reference of everything to something higher than yourself. And that is surrender. Surrender does not mean idleness, does not mean sitting without doing anything, or surrendering of judgment. Sri Aurobindo used to joke that when we ask to surrender, the first thing people surrender is their common sense. And that's not a very good beginning. Common sense is a safeguard against many pitfalls in spiritual life. Self-delusions, subjectivisms. Common sense has to be kept. Only the quality of common sense has to be enlightened. Normally, our common sense is sense that is common to all, to the average humanity. That shall not. Common sense is a sense that should remain always with you, low or up, wherever you go, the heights of your being or the depths of your being. That discriminating sense must always be there. That is common between all the states of being. In the exercise of common sense, if we commit mistakes of judgment, it shouldn't really matter. Rather than take everything from somebody else, for whom some things may be true, but they may not be true to us. It is not true that there is only one truth. There are many truths. The one capital truth manifests itself in a million truth forms, and each one has a truth that corresponds to the need of his being. If we understand this and keep it in mind, that is the first step towards universal consciousness. There is a truth in every approach, in every ideology, in every religion, in every person. Even the worst of us has a point of light. And when we meet the most condemned persons, if we call that point of light, that point of goodness in that person, however concealed, he reacts differently. It is elements like these that have bearing on our day-to-day life. It is these elements that connect spiritual life with practical life. And that leads Sri Aurobindo to say, all life is yoga. Spiritual life is not something different, something compartmentally isolated, but it flows in every moment of life. If only we remember what is expected of us in each situation by the divine, by the soul, we turn our external life into spiritual life.
you say there is no one truth, and
Yes.
really there are the difficulties to know what is the truth. Or is it one should not try to know what is the truth?
No. One should try to know what is the truth. There is one fundamental truth. No. But you meet it at different levels, at different points, in different ways. For instance, a fundamental truth is the truth of oneness. Unity. God is one, consciousness is one, life is one, matter is one, everything one. But because one, unity, oneness is the fundamental truth. Variety, manifoldness, multiplicity is not a falsehood. That is also a truth. At this level, where there is manifestation, multiplicity is a truth. It is the one that gives life to this multiplicity. And multiplicity is there because of the supporting one.
When you say common sense and spirituality on the spiritual side, how do you visualize common sense? What should be the relationship between common sense and spirituality? Which is the overriding factor?
The more spiritual you are, the more common sense you have. See, what is mistaken to be common sense is, in this world, is, you may call a pragmatic sense. What is useful? What is immediately effective? But that's not common sense. Common sense is the sense of truth which obtains in all conditions. So, a Muslim, say of the medieval ages, he took it that everyone who doesn't accept Allah, practice Islam, should be put to death. That is his conception of spirituality. But if we apply common sense, we will know this is not that. What about so many who were born before Allah? So many beyond Mid East. Same thing with Christianity. All those who are not baptized have their passports to hell. You see. Now what about those who were born before Jesus? What about those where Christianity has not reached? Now common sense will tell you that you just can't hold good.
In God it's all good and I'll forget.
Exactly. Violence in the name of God, exclusion in the name of God. It can never be. It is a falsehood, it is a perversion. It is religious egoism.
The same way, I might be more specific. I'm sorry, I didn't formulate my question. When common sense and spirituality are at conflict, and how does one really decide the issue?
It is a hypothetical question, because real common sense can never conflict with spirituality, because spirituality itself is common sense raised to its acme. What contradicts your common sense cannot be spiritual. Yes.
I just want to thank you for being here, and to also let you know that just in listening to you, I feel a quieting that I've never felt before. Just in listening, even more so than my meditations. I'm very rough when I meditate, and I feel very relaxed when I listen to you speak. I'm going to miss tuning you in at 7:30 every evening.
It will continue in some way.
It's a shame that we couldn't maybe tune you in on our television set.
It will, you see, if you tune in your inner television, it will always there. These things, physical distance, doesn't matter. Once the connection is made, even if you remember, that thing will start. Because it is not something personal. It is an impersonal ocean of quiet, of calm, of peace, to which some of us get opened and it flows. Normally we are so busy, occupied, preoccupied to notice that around us. Slowly, it is a great matter of rejoicing for me that the West is slowly opening in many areas to the necessity of this peace and silence. That itself shows that nature has come to a point when the need will work out the answer. America is not what it was 10 years ago from this point of view. And in the next 10 years, revolutionary changes will take place in the field of psychology, in the field of spiritual culture. All that is happening, every little thing has a meaning. Things are breaking down, people are seeing things in their naked, reality. How hollow are our conceptions of education, culture, social etiquette, all these. Sharing the road 60 years ago. Scratch a modern civilized man and you will find the primitive man still. Our civilization is very superficial, skin deep. Should you ever come to the East, you would be very welcome to our place. To live there for some time, participate. I would be happy to have you there.
Thank you.
We will be continuing these studies here at Dr. Kleinman's place. And I would like like-minded seekers to take advantage of it and collaborate with him. He will work out the details. And it will be directly connected with our center in India, in a spiritual way, not physically. your service conditions do not, make it difficult for you to have your name associated with this center's group, study group. No, because in some universities, in America, they have asked the professors to leave. You see, in Ohio, what is that? Columbus, Ohio. There, one professor was sworn from India because he conducted a seminar or something. So he was told. So he is leaving and he is coming to Florida or somewhere. So you don't have that kind of thing.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
I've been here too long.
And after all, this is a study group.
Yes.
We are not proselytizing anyone or asking anybody to leave their religions. No. I say, each one must recognize the strong points and the limitations of his own practiced religion. Essentially, all religions have something nice. What do you say, Puni?
I'm not saying anything. I'm being quiet. I'd like to come and spend some time with you before you leave.
Oh yes.
Speak to you.
Certainly.
I'll call in.
Certainly, you are welcome. Brother, you are welcome. Dr. Clement hopes to arrange a talk by me to his students. I don't know, Friday you said.
Friday at 9 o'clock.
Philosophy class, is it? Or religion class?
Comparative religion class.
Comparative.
9 o'clock, did you say? Or 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock. And of course, everyone who can make it is invited.
Even if we're not in the class.
Yeah.
Right.
One feels, at least I feel, that this life is too short to learn everything that is to be learned.
Knowledge is infinite, and one can never know everything by the mind. So even for mental knowledge, you have to establish certain priorities, which are the most relevant, important to you, and study them first. But know always that mentally you can never hope to know all that you should know. But in consciousness, when you reach to that some deeper level, you know. What you can't know by the mind, by identity of consciousness, you know. You feel, you get angry, you feel love. It's not a mental thing, idea. You feel it. You feel you love. You don't tell the other person, I am loving you. Isn't it? That person also feels that. So it is. Consciousness speaks to consciousness. It is an experience of consciousness. So mental knowledge is only a small selection of the total knowledge. So if you culture your consciousness, deepen your consciousness, you will know exactly what you need to know at every moment. Mental knowledge is something to start with. There is a saying of a Chinese sage who says, when I begin to feel that I don't know anything, then I know that I have begun to know. When I feel I have known everything, it means I do not know anything. The Chinese have many pregnant observations like that.
Yeah, this is very true. More you read and more you study and the more you grow up, it looks like, you're becoming more dumb or something like that.
Yes, exactly. And one gets depressed. One gets depressed. How am I to know all this? So many things. So one day I remember there is one very experienced professor who was teaching philosophy for 38 years in one of the old universities of India. He came to my room and then he said, "Today I am most depressed," he said. I said, "Why?" Because he said, "I read Sri Aurobindo's Synthesis of Yoga." You understand? When he read that, he came to know the extent of his ignorance. How much is to be known? And what all he has been teaching till now is very superficial. And he was pretty about to retire. The age span before him, lifespan, was not that big. So he despaired of ever knowing things. So if you silence the mind, the knowledge grows. It is not by brain activity that knowledge is formed. Brain is used by the knowledge to formulate itself. It's difficult for you scientists to accept this.
I understand what you're saying because I feel very bad every day. Especially I felt very bad when I saw all his books over there.
You should, excuse me, you should be in his class. Because I have a list that goes on forever. Every time that I sit in the class and he mentions 10 books that you should definitely read. So you write them all down and you look at them and you know, oh my God, how am I ever going to be able to? By the time you finish one of Dr. Kleinman's classes listed this way, I buy some and then I look at them and I go, I'll never be able to finish reading all these books.
You think, I think sometimes in this term also, like, I'm more than 30 now, and yet I haven't learned anything substantial, you see. And then I count my days, how long, maybe 20 years more, 30 years more, And that...
No, I don't think so. Mother used to always say that till 50 you are still a child. At 50 you start growing. And she said, by 80 a person is mature, really he can make his life thereafter, and he comes to his ripe manhood at 80. Understand? So you have so many years, more years than you have spent. So you are still a child.
Maybe in the country, that's so, you know how we treat our old people in this
Oh yeah,
country?
this is a scandal. This is the one thing I have not appreciated in America. Every other thing I have learned to appreciate, and I speak of it when I go back. But this treatment of old people, that is very heartless. Heartless. I don't know. In our country, in the East, an old person is always cherished for his wisdom, for his experience. And in every home, family, there is one old person at least to whom everybody looks for support, for guidance. And it is understood that children, they look after and support their parents or grandparents even. Here I find they go and they also don't expect to be looked after by children. You see? But they are very pessimistic once they go to old people's homes. Their whole mind, psychology, they feel they are useless. That they are useless. That's not true. And they found these old people in homes are most cantankerous. So there are no social workers willing to work there now. You see. So this is very bad.
I think it has to do a lot with but the idea of retirement, a man retires at age, what is it, 65? or whatever
Here it is, in our country it is 58, because of unemployment. 58. But still,
But then what do they do after that? They keep themselves busy?
They
and
keep themselves busy, they do some honorary jobs or part-time private jobs. They take something or other.
Here they don't. A lot of men...
How is it in South America? Same?
In South America, no, we still have a reverence
I think so.
for the
I
older.
think so.
Not as much as perhaps in your
No,
country,
but still.
Like in my family, the older people are very well taken care of and loved and respected. But I see, like, for instance, Fred's father, who was a man with perfect physical health, who has an excellent mind, and he's an extremely intelligent man with many talents, and then he does nothing. He retired and he cooks and cleans around the house, and he doesn't do anything with his life.
I see.
And we go over and we say, hey, you've got to get out of it. But he doesn't want to. He just doesn't want to do it. And so many men they retire and then they stay home and they wait until they die. And that's it.
In our country, typical retired man from the government service, what he would do, we have got rationing system in many places, because of shortage of commodities. Milk is rationed, kerosene oil is rationed, some rice is rationed in some places. So to stand in a queue, if you go there, you come back after 2 hours. You lose so much of time. Children, people, office going people, they all can't afford. So some of these retired people volunteer to their neighborhoods. So you give me your bag, you give me your bag. When I go to collect my house, I'll collect yours. And they said, this is some useful occupation, they said. We are useful to somebody. And they will go, and those shopkeepers also will know that they show the card number. And they will pour that man's ration there. So I don't say this is going on everywhere, but this is something illustrative of the use enlightened old people make of their life. Charitable, there are a number of charitable organizations. They go and give honorary service there. Accounting, various ways,
What was it about philosophy that my dad brought up Christmas Day? Something y'all were discussing. Philosophies he'd studied. He knows everything. He amazes me. That's good.
What about the tradition of the 4 stages of life? Is that still serious?
That is no more there. It is just not applicable in the modern age.
And the caste system, we still think
No,
that's
it is not.
good.
It is breaking down. More breaking down more rapidly than the distinction between the whites and the blacks here. It is now more or less economic, between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. That may take all these overtones, religious overtones or caste overtones, but the truth is at an economic level, conflict.
Is it possible, suppose, like you're saying that you can know at every moment the truth of every moment by being very silent and through the deep consciousness.
Yes.
Now, is it possible, the mind can also be taken to its highest peak, you see, of activity, and also the consciousness very, very deep of a person? Is it possible? Or?
The utmost, the optimum state of intellect, the mind, is when it is absolutely silent. It reflects. Mind can only reflect knowledge. It cannot produce knowledge. So, when a state of utter immobility of mind, without thoughts, without movement, then knowledge is deflected. Knowledge at its highest is a deflector of knowledge. Because knowledge is from another level of consciousness. Meditate for 15 minutes.